Welcome back to yet another edition of the I Prefer the 80s and 90s Sports podcast where I, Richard Harris, talk about why I prefer the sports of the 80s and 90s to the sports of today. My topic today is kind of vague, where I'm going to talk to you about something I figured out last night. Last night was the big awaited debut of Victor Wembanyama. Victor Wembanyama has been touted as the greatest under 18, 19-year-old basketball player, the most highly coveted, wanted basketball player ever. And I find it funny. And I like saying that phrase for some reason. But I find it funny in watching a game last night, the excuses started flowing. And the first excuse that started flowing was the Spurs have had 3 number 1 draft picks. David Robinson, Tim Duncan, and Victor. David Robinson was a man. That's what Richard Jefferson said last night. He said he was a man. He was 24 years old, serving his country. They let him out of his military commitment and allowed him to become an NBA Hall of Famer. Tim Duncan had 4 years of college basketball player of the year, Hall of Fame NBA career, was worth the admission. Victor didn't have those things. Victor played in France. Victor has been a professional for a couple of years, but playing basketball in France. Not in the NCAA, learning how to become a college basketball player and learning how to become a professional. Not serving his country and becoming a man like David Robinson. So already the excuses are going to start coming out for him if he is not Kevin Garnett, if he is not Kobe Bryant, if he is not LeBron James. And I find people of this era sometimes just needs to shut up. They need to shut up and let him play. They need to stop saying things in hyperbole and superlatives and let these people just play. Because at the end of the day, if they pan out to be as great as you describe them to be, you're not going to get, what are you going to get out of all the superlatives and amazing statements you make about them? Nothing. I bring this up a lot. It reminds me of a time when Tiger Woods had not won, and Johnny Miller said, Tiger Woods is done winning major championships. And then every time there was a major championship for the next couple of years, some announcer would be like, this is the week he's going to end the streak. This is the week he's going to do it. And finally, Bobby Clampett said it, and it happened. And he got patted on the back for saying it. Here is what's sad and funny at the same time. On any planet, in any world, if you are a 19-year-old and you come into your sport and dominate your sport, you are worthy of praise. You are I want to say nothing is godlike, but you are extraordinary. And it happens. Magic Johnson was a 19-year-old turned 20-year-old, led the Lakers to a championship. Nobody talks about that. They talk about high school age kids coming into the league and being man ready to play basketball. The best 19-year-old baseball player I ever saw probably was Ken Griffey Jr. But Darryl Strawberry was pretty darn good as a 19-year-old, and so was Dwight Gooden. And so those three came in and did what they did as 19-year-olds and were phenomenal. And unfortunately for Darryl and Doc, other things messed up their careers, but both of them have multiple championships, and both of them were reasons why they have championships. And baseball is different from basketball in that in baseball, as a 19-year-old, if you could throw like Nolan Ryan could when he was 19 years old and throwing 100 miles an hour, but you couldn't tame it. But if you're 19 years old and you can play and pitch in baseball, they put you out there. And they want to see you perform. And if you get your brains beat out, they want to see how tough you become and see if you can really play the game. Ken Griffey Jr. was lucky because he had his daddy. His daddy was a good baseball player, champion, played on several teams. But he always had his daddy's protection. No one was going to go after Ken Griffey Jr. negatively because he didn't let you, because he was spectacular as a 19-year-old phenom. But very, very, very rarely. Hasn't happened in a lot of years in baseball. There's been so many stories over the years of 19-year-olds getting opportunities to play baseball, but they don't come straight from college or from high school directly onto a major league roster. They spend sometimes in the minor leagues a little bit of time to sort of hone something, and then they get the shot. The Angels this year had a player, first baseman, who got drafted this year. He played in college, and he made it to the major leagues within, 60, 80 days? And set a record for most consecutive games to start a career getting on base. So I'm not dismissing that if you got the talent, you should be where you are. What I'm dismissing is hyperbole and superlative commentary. What I'm dismissing is when they say we've never seen anyone like Victor Wembanyama. And I'm going to keep saying it until someone says it's not true or someone shuts me up about it. Ralph Sampson was 7'4", was supposed to revolutionize basketball as a 7'4" guy who could play all 5 positions. He could dribble, he could pass, he could shoot. Ralph Sampson got hurt, fell off emotionally, fell off, got caught up in some bad stuff, and we never heard about Ralph Sampson again until the last few years when Coach Holland passed away, and while Ralph Sampson was welcome back to the University of Virginia to witness some basketball games, and they interview him and stuff, but they never talked to him about NBA. He and Hakeem Olajuwon were the first true Twin Towers, and they led Houston to the NBA Finals. Unfortunately, they ran up against the best Twin Towers in the history of basketball, the Robert Parrish, Kevin McHale. Then you add a third tower, Bill Walton, triumvirate. Then you mix in a little Larry Bird, mix in a little Dennis Johnson, a little Danny Ainge, and they beat your butt and win the championship. But no one talks about Ralph Sampson. And Ralph Sampson was what, a 3-time college basketball player of the year? Unfortunately, part of the greatest upset in the history of college basketball when his Virginia team was ranked number 1 and they lost to Division 3 or 2 school, Chaminade. But Ralph Sampson was supposed to revolutionize basketball. Now today, because of the NBA, there are many 7-foot, 6'11" men around the world who are getting coordination with their feet, with their hands, and with their eyes. The 7-foot, 6'11" phenomenon is incredible because around the world there are so many. You would think that being a 7-foot, 6'11", 7'1", 7'2" is a statistical anomaly. But it's not, because so many people around this world and country are that size. They just can't dribble. They just can't shoot. They just can't have or play basketball. They're scientists. They're doctors. There's so many other professions. And some of them tried out for the NBA and couldn't make it. But if you watch international basketball, every team seems to have a 7-foot guy. Every team. In fact, that's one of the craziest things about sports history. The reason why Russia beat us in the 72 Olympics, other than the bull crap with the score, the time error, and game was over, we won, and then all of a sudden they're like, no, there's still time on the clock, and that nonsense, is that Russia had these gigantic 7-foot guys, and so on the last play of the game that gave Russia the victory, Russia threw the ball practically the length of the court to one of its 7'2" guys who was able to jump over our biggest player on the floor at the time, which for some reason Tom McMillan wasn't back then. He was 7 something, or was it Burleson? I can't remember. I think it was McMillan, but he was able to catch the ball over Doug Collins, who was 6'3", and scored a basket, and Russia beat us. And so the 7-foot person phenomenon is not new. It's just that now they're more coordinated, better eye-hand, feet coordination, not clumsy, and therefore able to play in the NBA. But don't start making excuses for Victor. If you're going to pump him up to be the greatest thing since Halle Berry, then you got to live with what happens. You got to live with the fact that that team may not win 30 games. And he's literally, I don't want to say a sideshow, but he's literally going to be like the circus. Because every city that he plays in, they're going to fill the arenas. I've already got a ticket for Sunday. And the bigger the superstar he's going to go up against, the more it's going to be on TV. We're going to see more Spurs games than when they won the championship. Now, can he play? Yeah, he could play. But he's going to learn the hard way that the NBA is a man's league. They're going to physically hit him. They're going to mentally try to mess with him. The officials are going to call fouls one night that they called the previous night, and then the next night not call the foul. I mean, it's funny. The lovely Cassidy Hubbard asked Coach Popovich, "What do you say to Victor after the way he played in the first half?" And he said, "Well, Victor knows what he needs to do." Now, Pop usually has a smart remark, but Pop knows that Victor doesn't know what he needs to do, and obviously Victor needs to stop fouling. He had 5 fouls, couldn't stay on the floor. But the point is, last night showed me something that I didn't think about. It showed me why I have issues with this era of sports. And it showed me last night that my issue is truly legit. And that is, they are too damn young to be playing professional sports. It's different when a 19-year-old phenom in tennis is out there playing, because the 19-year-old tennis kid is playing every day ad nauseum and getting better and better and better. And usually he or she has started younger and is playing against grown people and learned how to win and is learning how to win on the fly. And by the time they reach 19, if this all sunk in and become real, they get good and can play. Venus and Serena started when they were, 16 and 14? Monica Seles came on the scene when she was 15. Steffi Graf came on the scene when she was young too. Carlos Alcaraz on the scene now. Became #1 player in the world at 19. Rafa Nadal came on the scene as an 18-year-old. Andre Agassi came on the scene as an 8. The point is, they played so much tennis against the best competitions that they got better and better and better. Tiger Woods came on the scene as 20. Hello World, remember that? He might have even been 19. But he had to learn how to compete against the men first before he became great. Golf is different also because you're not playing men, you're playing the ball. And you're playing Mother Nature, and you're playing the course. But basketball, you're playing against grown men who are trying to make a living. Football, they don't let you try football at 19 because they feel that you're physically not ready. Even though we've all seen some 18 or 19-year-old young men who were ready. I remember Herschel Walker as an 18-year-old. He was ready. Bo Jackson, he was ready. But you had to go through the growing pains, I guess, of college to learn. That is the importance of college. I was at a movie premiere party last week, and this British guy was talking ad nauseum about how going to school is such a waste of time. Going to college, going to school, what do you learn? What do you retain from going to school? And I didn't want to get into the conversation because I didn't want to be Norman negative. I just sat back and listened to him and his pretty Asian wife talk about how education is useless. I'm not saying that he's 100% wrong, but he's wrong. And he's an older guy. He was like my age, a little bit older. And he just was going on and on. And he's a successful businessman. And I wish I spoke out and said something, because education is important. Because not all education is 1 + 1 = 2. There's life education in schools that you don't get in the real world until you get into the real world. Learning to be amongst people, learning to compete amongst other people. And by the way, you go to school and you learn how to multiply, add, subtract, and divide. You learn where certain concepts are, certain words are. I'm trying to get a teaching job. I just got informed about a job that I applied for a teacher's position to be a tutor. And passing was 80%. I got a 76. I'm trying to think how many questions that they were. So that means that if I did, out of 12 questions, I got 9 out of 12, which is 75%, I failed. Wouldn't you rather have a teacher that got a 76 than got a 56? Which means I got one question wrong. Too many. And now they're texting me because they want me to take the test over again because they want me to teach. Which one is it? You rejected me twice. And now you want me to take the test again to see if I can pass it. Make up your darn mind. Is Victor the greatest young talent we've ever seen? Or is it Victor is really going to be good, but he didn't have what David Robinson had. He's not Tim Duncan. He's not Patrick Ewing. He's not Akeem Olajuwon. He's not Ralph Sampson. He has to learn and get used to America, get used to the things of this league, and maybe he'll be great. But he's got to survive. And those skinny legs, they're not going to hold up. And that's my issue with this generation. This generation just says what it wants to say with no backbone, with no confirmation. They have little facts, but they don't have the whole facts. That's the biggest problem with media. They want to tell the story, but they don't want to tell the whole story. They want to say the highlight, but they don't want to tell the meaning. And it's hilarious watching hockey right now, too. This poor kid, Connor Bedard, they put an arrow over his head every time he's on the ice now, so we can see who he is and see what he's doing. And so far, the games I've watched 2, he ain't score. He didn't do anything. So I'm like, take the arrow off his head and let him be. Let him play. He's not Carlos Alcaraz. Neither is Victor. Victor's not Carlos Alcaraz. Victor is not going to lead the Spurs to the championship this year. They're not even going to make the playoffs. The West is loaded. So let him be a kid. That was one of my biggest angering things of last year when Angela Rye, who I like as a personality in the media, sitting there with Banchero from the Orlando Magic, who just got drafted by the Magic as the #1 pick in the draft. And she said, so what's your platform? He was 19 years old. What are you going to do to make society better? And he's sitting there with his mom, who I guess is like a professor somewhere. And he gave an answer. And I threw my hat at the television. And I was like, Paolo Banchero's his name. And I said, I could never root for this kid anymore. Because I wish he had looked her in the face and said, Miss Rye, with all due respect, I'm a 19-year-old young man. And I want to grow up and be a man before I am able to start throwing out platforms for the world. I want to live a little bit and learn a little bit to be something before I say, be like me. Being drafted number one is luck. I got talent, but I had to be lucky because there were other players who was as good as I. I wish he had said that to her. I wish he had said, I'm 19 years old, I'm single, I'm going to mingle, I can gamble in Vegas, I can't drink, but I might be able to gamble. I'm going to have me some fun. Then I'm going to be responsible and take care of my family, take care of my siblings, and then try to be the best pro I can be for the Orlando Magic. And if in doing so, I educate myself on areas of this world, which I intend to, then I want to be a role model for people. Period. That's what he should have said. But until then, tonight, my family, we're going to have some food. We're going to have some paella. And we're going to eat and drink, be merry in my home. I wonder what her face would have done. It might have hit the floor. I digress. Anyway, let these kids be kids. Let them learn. Let them grow. Let them succeed. Let them fail. Let them fight back. Let them win. That's why I picture on my wall Darryl Strawberry and Dwight Gooden and Mike Tyson. They rose. They fell. Rose again. They fell. They're rising again. That's why they were three of my favorite athletes of all time. Victor, I want you to succeed. Let everything else fall in place. Be you. But this is why I prefer the sports of the 80s and 90s. And the sports in the 80s and 90s, yeah, there was pressure. Yeah, there was pressure on Strawberry, pressure on Gooden, pressure on Mike Tyson. They embraced it. They gobbled it up. They failed. But what thing that the three of them have in common? They didn't go to college. Neither did Victor. All the people who went to college who were super studs like them had some success. They weren't kicked out the door to go and make millions. And I'm not saying these men were. But we got to stop having expectations. Just because you can fight for our country at 18 doesn't mean you can run our country at 18 too. That's why the presidential age starts at 35, not 18. And if you are gifted enough, smart enough as an 18-year-old to start a startup business and it becomes crazy rich and you become crazy successful, that ain't you, that's God. Remember that. 19-year-olds should be 19-year-olds. I'll say this last thing before I stop. Scoot Henderson last night played his first NBA game. Scoot Henderson didn't go to college. He went to the G League and was killing it in the G League. Now, the G League, for all of you who don't know, is a league of young men who couldn't quite make the NBA team, so they got put on sort of like a minor league team to get better, or didn't go to college and was good enough to make the G League because they are talented enough. And it's not just for Americans, it's for Europeans as well. Scoot Henderson went to the G League and got a little bit of a baptism. Last night, he got to play against his idol, Russell Westbrook. And the Clippers beat the Trailblazers. They were up by 20, ended up only winning by 10, I think it was. But the game was over and whatever. And the announcers kept saying, well, it's hard as a kid to play when you're playing against your idol, focusing and making excuses. And I'm like, again, with the excuse nonsense. And then Jimmy Jackson told his story. He said, my first game in the NBA was against the Portland Trailblazers, and I had to go up against Clyde Drexler and this person and that person. And obviously they had their way. Then he said his second game was against some other great front court. Then he had to play against that guy from Chicago. So it's hard. Yeah, it is hard. So everyone should stop talking about them and let them be kids. Let them learn. Russell Westbrook went to college for a year or two. Allen Iverson went to college. Got an education in college. Education isn't always books. Education is also life. You remember that?